So I've been diagnosed with ADHD, which means I have a deficiency of dopamine, and my brain doesn't function in the way that a neurotypical person's brain functions. So I find rewards in other things that a neurotypical person wouldn't. I was 39 when I was diagnosed, so I'm 40 now, so I've been diagnosed about 18 months. I think the popularity in people talking more about ADHD in women and the misconception that it is only in young boys at school and hyperactivity. And then there was lots of talk about it on social media about traits of ADHD, and I thought, actually, this sounds very much like me. So the more research I did, the more I realised that a lot of the things that I thought were personality traits are actually ADHD symptoms. And then it led me down a path of kind of doing more research and looking into diagnosis. So I have always excelled in education, but not in a traditional sense. So I'm very good at retaining information. I'm not good. So at school I'd always be really good at exams and I'd always excel in an exam, but I'd always fail at coursework. So I'd never do my homework, I'd never do my coursework, and that would always bring my grades down. And I could always answer a question really easily, but to do a long piece of work around that, I'd find it quite boring and I wouldn't find any motivation to do that. So it's always been there, I think, throughout my life. And then as I've got older, I just found that everybody else could plan their week's work. So they'd say, on Monday I'm going to do this, and on Tuesday I'm going to do this. Whereas I'd wait until that was a deadline, and I'd need a deadline to do things. So it does affect me, and sometimes I have to self-impose deadlines. But if there's not a pressure added to that, then I don't find the reward in it. So it's really hard to start that task. So I suppose that's my kind of day-to-day struggles. But it doesn't change who I am. I've learned to cope with my ADHD because I've lived with it for 40 years. And I've only been diagnosed for 2. So it doesn't actually change any of my coping mechanisms. It just validates some of the reasons why I don't associate with other people in the way that other people work, I suppose. And I find it easier to forgive myself for some of the things I struggle with. So I can forgive myself because I know I'm not being lazy or I'm not being unorganised. It actually is my brain working differently. So it's easier to excuse myself. I think the main challenges are people's assumptions. So I don't announce that I have ADHD. I think when people can guess sometimes if they know the real me. But I think the challenge sometimes is the assumption. I think when people don't know I have it and then I confirm that I do have ADHD, it's the assumption that changes. They change their assumption of me and who I am as a person, and they sometimes assume that I'm not as capable as I was before. I am the calmest person you'll ever meet in a crisis. If you need anything sorted in a crisis, I will be as calm as anything. If I drop something on the floor, it winds me up, but a crisis, I'll be fine. So I'm very good at kind of crisis management. I'm very good at seeing things from a different perspective in the bigger picture, and looking at different alternatives. I think it gives you a real ability to think outside of the box, and it also gives you the ability to come to really solid solutions to problems quite quickly. Because you have the ability to run so many chains of thought in your head at the same time, you can kind of analyse the outcomes of multiple situations really quickly. And then sometimes that's a frustration that people need. You need to take them on that journey to get to that solution with you. But yeah, you can find really outside of the box thinking and easy to find a solution to a problem. I think people perceive it as a hyperactivity. So I think traditionally in males, it's been diagnosed in children, and it's that kind of vision of naughty boys at school running around, being quite unruly, whereas actually I am hyperactive, I just don't look it on the outside. Mine's internal, so my brain doesn't ever stop, it never turns off, it never never takes a break. So I think it's the perception that even when you're not doing something, you're not doing, but I am constantly thinking about things all the time, so it can be quite exhausting. But at the same time, I get things done quite quickly because I've thought all the problems through before I've got to doing it, so yeah. Yes, for good and bad. I think it's becoming much more accepted that women have ADHD and it presents very differently. But there's also a current perception that it's very fashionable and everybody just has ADHD, or I think I'm a little bit ADHD, and that can be quite frustrating when you're not seeing the challenges that you have to overcome when you do have ADHD. But yeah, I think it's positive. More people are realising that women do have ADHD and that it's not anxiety, and I think it's commonly diagnosed as anxiety. So women being able to really understand the way their brain works and help themselves is a positive. That's my husband. So I have a million half-done jobs. If I decided I wanted to paint the room, I'm quite impulsive, so I won't wait for him, I'll just get on with it. And then I'll get bored halfway through and start something else. It's always a load of laundry, just abandoned and left, so I've put it in and then forgotten to take it out. I spend a lot of time, I mask a lot during the day, and that's a learned behaviour. So I think my home life, I'm exhausted a lot of the time when I get home because I've spent the day masking or having to think and put all of my energy into being on task, that when I get home I'm quite exhausted from that. So it is quite a place of rest for me at home, and I can unmask and be myself. But having a 5-year-old makes that quite chaotic as well, because she has a routine and I don't have a routine. So trying to fit in with her routine can be quite challenging for me, but it also is great fun because we don't have to worry too much about doing things on time. So, yeah. I think boring things are really, so monthly tasks are challenging, but luckily you don't have to do too much of that. But I think I find myself really fortunate that I've got a job in a career where I can use the positives of ADHD and use my skills. And my job is quite varied, so that keeps the interest levels up, and that means I can really get into things. ADHD comes with hyper-focus, so sometimes I really want to get something done, but there's other priorities that I need to manage, and that means that my hyper-focus is broken, and then I can sometimes lose interest in that task and not want to come back to it. So I have to be really careful to manage all of the conflicting priorities that I have in a day-to-day task, but I have an amazing team, so they keep me on task. I think my key strengths are thinking outside of the box. I'm quite a strategic thinker, so I can always see the bigger picture and I can always see opportunities within a situation, even if that's a negative situation. So I'm very forward thinking and solution focused. I'm very calm in a crisis, and I'm always keen to learn what went wrong and make it not happen again. And that is quite a common trait of ADHD, that when everybody else is kind of struggling to process that emotion and that stress, that you're very calm. So yeah, they're real skills that I think I bring to my career. Or anything boring. Anything admin related, boring, that is repetitive, just doesn't bring me any joy at work, so yeah. I think tenacious. I don't stop until I've finished what I want, and that's sometimes a coping strategy in terms of ADHD, that you have to drive yourself to completion. I think I'm positive. I always see a positive in any situation, and I hope that I'm quite fun to be around. You never know what's going to happen. It's always something new. I think research. I think social media can be confusing. And looking at ADHD UK and really reliable sources of information is much more beneficial than scrolling socials and looking. I think the messages are good on socials, and it's great for raising awareness, but it can also be quite challenging to find yourself fitting in with that and some of the misconceptions. But I think it's to really think about your lifestyle and whether diagnosis will bring you a benefit. Will diagnosis help you? If it will, then pursue it. It's nearly a year to 18 months process, so it's a long task to begin. But will it bring value? Is medication something you want to try? And will a diagnosis really benefit you in any way? I think ADHD affects every single part of your life, and some people are very fortunate that they can see the benefits of that and they're able to cope with the difficulties and overcome those. But actually, it does mean that any additional stresses in your life can really kind of have a bigger impact than they would on a neurotypical person. So the earlier you can reach out for support and gain support from professionals, the better. And calling our helpline and BEM is useful for anybody. But I think if you're neurodivergent, getting help earlier is always better, because then you can integrate that into your life and you won't get to the crisis points.